Hello and welcome to Dining with Death. This episode is on my playlist, Dining with the Deceased, where we visit locations that are supposedly haunted. Today I'm coming to you from Old Chinese Camp Town near Merced, California. It's now a ghost town. I'm going to take you on a little tour of the area. We're going to talk about the ghosts that supposedly live here, and of course we're going to eat in the area. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. As you leave Merced, California, and head out into the lush green forests of Central California, it gets desolate pretty quickly. This is truly beautiful country, and the weather is, more often than not, very mild. It gets cold here in the winters, but not North Dakota cold, and it gets hot here in the summers, but not Palm Springs hot. It is just very, very moderate and very peaceful. During the gold rush of the 1800s, many people migrated to California to try and find their fortune. And between 1849 and 1882, many of those people, thousands in fact, were Chinese immigrants who came to the area to search for treasure in the legendary Gold Mountain. These Chinese immigrants formed one of the earliest settlements established in Tuolumne County, located in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Not only were the Chinese immigrants here to look for gold, but they were here to build the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, the story of the construction of that railroad is incredible and its own separate historical event. And the Chinese influence on that construction, many believe it couldn't have been done or would have been done more slowly without them. In the late 1800s, Chinese Camp was known as a thriving hub of Chinese culture in California. The town had several shops, restaurants, and other businesses owned by Chinese immigrants, and had a population made up of mainly Chinese miners, laborers, and families. The Chinese Camp Post Office and General Store were both opened in April of 1854. You can see the remnants of those buildings still standing here today. Aren't these beautiful? I am endlessly fascinated with old buildings. Wandering in places like this is one of my favorite things to do. I can picture people dressed in the clothing of the day, sitting on their porches, pulling weeds from around their fence posts. I can smell dinners cooking from the stoves inside, and I can see people stopping to chat with their neighbors as they walk back and forth to the stores, the bars, and the post office. It won't be long now, and I'll be able to take a video like this, and AI will turn it back into what it used to look like, which is something I find exciting and terrifying all at the same time. But for now, I use my imagination to see what this place once was and how it used to appear. Some of the people who came here found a little gold, but most ended up working on the railroad and in the area mines, and after a couple of decades, many were gone. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, a wave of Asian hate and discrimination swept through the country. Chinese people especially were often the target of discrimination and violence. In 1903, a fire destroyed most of what this town was, and the people who remained here simply did not have the resources or the money to rebuild it. That fire effectively brought an end to the Chinese community here in Chinese Camp. Despite its tumultuous history, this place remains an important landmark for Chinese American history and culture. Many historic sites in the town, including the Chinese Camp Cemetery, which we are going to visit in a moment, and you are going to love it, let me tell you. Monument Peak, the historic old jail, they all honor the legacy of the Chinese immigrants who once called the area home. As we walked these streets and I let my imagination wander, I thought about what it must have been like so long ago to be out here in the hills with so few other people. There were no telephones, no electricity, maybe only a car or two later on. I'm assuming there was a town doctor, but I've come to learn that not all of these little towns did have their own doctor. Some had to go miles and miles for medical care. And I always think about how strange that is to us now. To know that if you get hurt or you get ill, there really isn't much help for you. They were really out here living on their own, making their way in this beautiful but isolated area. Today, Chinese Camp is a peaceful and sparsely populated community with a mixture of very, very old buildings and some newer old buildings. There are about 125 people who live here, and as soon as we pulled into town and began filming, they either went right inside and shut their doors, or they came out and were very curious. It was clear to us that they don't get many visitors here. We spoke with the groundskeeper for quite a while. He was very chatty and helpful and gave us some first-hand knowledge and information about some of these old buildings that I'll share with you as we go. The current population is now made up primarily of descendants of the original settlers, along with some new residents who have moved to the area for its natural beauty and historic charm. It remains a very unique blend of American and Chinese traditions. Throughout the year, the town hosts a number of events and festivals that showcase its culture and history. The annual Chinese Camp Gold Rush Festival features live music, food, and historic reenactments that celebrate the town's pioneering spirit and its lively culture from the boomtown days. There are small parades from time to time, and people come to see the surrounding sites, like the Tuolumne River, which offers ample opportunities for rafting, kayaking, and other water sports. We're here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and those have lots of places to hike and camp. This area is a nature lover's dream, and because of the mild climate, you can participate in those events almost year-round. This place is a fascinating window into California's rich, multicultural history and a testament to the resilience and perseverance of the Chinese immigrants who helped shape the state's identity. But along with all the natural beauty and interesting history, the area people here experienced hardships, and some say those tragic events left a lasting impression on this area. There are stories and legends of paranormal activity in Chinese camp, and there are people here that have no doubt the town is one of the most haunted places in Central California. They will tell you that there are several haunted spots, like the abandoned school and this tiny little structure that served as the town pub. There were murders here, shootings, and other tragic events like women dying in childbirth, children dying of childhood ailments. And yes, I will tell you, there is a bit of a sadness and a heavy feeling to the area. Many people believe that the spirits of Chinese immigrants and other former residents continue to dwell in the area, staying here to remember it as it once was. This is the former general store. The ground floor served as the shop and even had some living quarters in the back. The second floor was a big open space that served as a social hall. All the town events were held right up there. The 4th of July, Christmas, Easter, weddings, town meetings, they all took place right up there. This little old house has Christmas lights on it. And as we walked towards it, I told Jason, somebody might be living there. And him, being a builder who is always looking at things like electrical and plumbing, laughed and said, honey, there has not been anyone there for a long time. But still, the Christmas lights hang as a reminder that this was once someone's home. On the corner of the main street in town stands this very large structure, much larger than the rest. This was the home of a man who struck it rich. He built this large, grand home and apparently had a very sizable family. He even had servants' quarters and provided housing for some of the groundskeepers in the area. You might recognize some of these buildings from the film Rawhide, starring Clint Eastwood. It's not uncommon for photographers to visit this area to take photos of the buildings still standing and those that are not. Look at this one. The entire roof has collapsed. And according to the resident we spoke with, there is a lot of very valuable antique farm equipment under these roof planks and aluminum siding. Apparently, there's a model of tractor under there that is one of the earliest manufactured pieces of modern farm equipment. And who knows what else is under there. Behind the very large home on the corner that you can see has been added onto stands a water tank that provided water to the house. This was a very modern way at the time of getting your water back then. I found this area to be particularly interesting. As the sun began to set and a chill floated through the February air, we headed up the hill to the town cemetery. I was very excited to see this. As you know, I love old cemeteries, and this one was something very special. Standing on a hill overlooking the town of Chinese Camp sits the St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church, established in 1854. The church is a historical landmark built by Englishmen who employed Chinese workers in the mines and on the railroads. There is only one church older than this still standing in Gold Rush country, and that alone makes it very special. I would have given a lot to get inside and walk around, but the church is boarded up tight, and I respect the fact that they don't want people in there. I did try to get some shots of what's inside, but they're not great. It looks mostly like piles of wood and old pews. Look at the windows. Look at the stucco work. This beautiful old church, nearing 200 years old, is just sitting here in the middle of nowhere on top of this gorgeous green hill, and next to it stands the town cemetery. Both the church and the cemetery sit under the canopy of this massive tree, barren still in February from winter. The tree looks as though it's standing guard, protecting the church and those that are buried around it, and I found myself drawn to it over and over again. I've been to a lot of spooky places in our travels, and this one doesn't rank at the top of the scariest. It does, however, rank, for me, as one of the most serene and unusual places I've been. We arrived during the golden hour, when the sun makes the most beautiful photographs, and while I am far from a professional photographer, I really enjoyed taking some photos here. The light was literally golden, and the fresh grass, already green here in California, even in February, smelled amazing. As I walked up to the church, I imagined all of the people who climbed this hill to attend services here. I imagine their faith was very important to them, living out here in the country with nothing surrounding them. I imagine God was a very big part of their lives, and their faith that they were being watched over helped them endure the very difficult lives they led. This is a small cemetery. There aren't a lot of bodies buried here, but there are some beautiful headstones with heart-wrenching inscriptions. This one says, "In life beloved, in death regretted." I loved this massive marker with the giant cross on top. You can tell I liked it because I took so many photos of it. Isn't it just perfect? Standing there defiantly against time and wind and rain, with the golden sun setting in the background and the Sierra Nevada mountains in the distance. It was breathtaking. We moved up farther onto the hill and came to the part of the cemetery that always makes me sad, the children's graves. This grave I found particularly interesting and very sad. It is the grave of Mary Ann Kempston. The headstone says she was 8 years old when she died, but the thing I found so unusual is that it also says buried with her are her 3 brothers, James, Willie, and the baby. Were they buried all at once? Was it a house fire? Was it familicide? Why would all 4 children die at the same time? Or were they buried here one by one, as some type of childhood illness took them one after the other? People have lovingly placed teddy bears and dolls and stuffed animals on the gravesite, which unfortunately only become creepier looking with time. These toys have been here for a while, long enough for the fluffy fur and synthetic hair on the doll's head to have rotted away. These little ones have been gone since the late 1800s, but for some reason, I still find it sad. In contrast, this is the grave of Sarah Goodwin, who was born in 1828 and died in 1898, so she lived to be 70 years old. Quite the accomplishment back then, especially living in a place as isolated as this one. We began to lose our beautiful golden sunlight, and the wind began to whistle through the dead trees. You know I consider myself a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, but I will tell you that from the time we arrived in Chinese camp, the entire time that we walked through the town, and then after we drove to and walked in the cemetery and around the church, I kept hearing a tapping sound, as though someone were striking 2 rocks together. Now, there are birds that do that, and there are plenty of animals in the area as well, but I did find it a bit odd that the exact same, somewhat metallic-sounding tap followed us as we wandered and filmed. At one point, Jason was clear across the cemetery from me, and I caught a bit of a chill and was almost a little nervous to turn around and look back up the hill at the church, half expecting to see someone in the window staring back at me, but that didn't happen. It's simply a building of wood and plaster, but it's also so much more. All of these buildings are so much more. They were built by the hands of people long dead, but people who were once alive with the dream of building the West, the dream of striking it rich, of living the good life and providing a great life for their families. Instead, they found themselves here in the California countryside, working as long as they could, and then passing, forgotten, from accident or illness or old age. Their dreams are as cold and forgotten as the bodies in these graves. But that's the thing about dreams. They never really die because they never really live. They are dreams that exist because there are people who nurtured them and hoped for them. And there is something about Chinese Camp California that reminds you, lives pass in the blink of an eye, and some are over before they even begin. But every life matters, and every dream matters, even if they don't always come true. We headed back into Merced, California, as there is absolutely nowhere to eat around Chinese Camp, and we headed here to the Branding Iron Restaurant. This place does not have a website, so I couldn't find information on how long it's been here or much about its story, but by the look of it, I would guess to be around the 1980s. I absolutely love places like this. Jason and I eat in a lot of fancy schmancy places, and I love those places too. But there's just something about an old wood-paneled room with taxidermy on the walls and exposed beam ceilings that does it for me. This place is known for its classic American food and its strong pours, and it definitely has that. It almost has a supper club feel to it. The service was great and the seating was comfortable. I ordered the filet and it was good. It came with a side of what was labeled as demi-glace, but I would say it was more like a gravy. The meat was juicy and tender, could have had a bit more salt for me. And I got these scalloped potatoes that were solid, nicely shaved in a rich, creamy cheese sauce, and then there were some fresh vegetables on the side. Jason ordered the prime rib. He did have to send it back as he likes it mooing, and it was a little too cooked for him the first time, but when it came back, it was great, and he said the au jus was particularly good. These old places have old grills and old stoves, and that always adds to the flavor, if you want my opinion. This is a nice little steakhouse here in Central California, home to Chinese Camp, one of the most intriguing and serene, and in some ways, the saddest ghost town we visited. But it has its own brand of beauty, and I can definitely see why, if a ghost were to hang around, they might pick this very spot to do it in. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, Dining with the Deceased. Hit the like button if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and of course, if you really want to support me, you can join my Patreon. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.